Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Okay, howdy, folks. We are live on the Where to Hunt podcast, the okayest podcast in the Midwest.
Just okay.
We got to keep it okay so we don't, people don't think we're too great, because then we have to live up to that expectation. If we're okay, the expectations are mediocre.
We are going to be great, though, due to our awesome guest for tonight.
Yep. So before we get into that, call out to our sponsors because they do mean a lot to us. In fact, if it wasn't for our title sponsor, Backwoods Grind, I wouldn't have the energy to do this show every Tuesday. So head on over to backwoodsgrind.com, enter in code W2H podcast. You're going to get 10% off. Got a bag of their stuff right here. This is the Camp House Blend. It is delicious. Greg can confirm.
Yep, it's my favorite flavor that they have.
Oh, yeah, favorite flavor. Otherwise, you can try. They have sampler packs. I think you did that.
I did do that.
How worked out for you?
6 different ones. Yeah, I found out which ones I liked and which ones weren't quite as good as the ones I liked. And they even have a decaf.
Ooh, yeah. What do they call that one? Like midnight or sunset or something like clever.
Maybe it should be something you should drink before you go to bed.
All right. And then additionally, if you look on the other side of the screen, we got Gumleaf USA. That's gumleafusa.com. We're still running the code from 2019. So if you want to enter in code W2H 2019, go to gumleafusa.com and you're going to get free shipping. These are a big ticket item. You cannot buy these boots in big box stores. They are handmade from scratch, and they're 85% natural rubber. They are more durable, arguably more comfortable, easy on, easy off with the Royal Zips. We both rock those. Do you have the field wellies too, the uninsulated ones?
I do.
Okay. Good early season boot for sure. I don't know about these cold temps, but certainly a great early season boot to get you further.
Yeah, they're probably good into October, and depending on if we get some warmer days in November, if you're moving around a lot, they're excellent boot.
Perfect. And then, one last one for right now. Our newest sponsor, Musket Powder. You're going to see their seasoning over here. We put that stuff on everything, although that's not their slogan. Their slogan is completely cover, then add a little more. It's camp tested. So head on over to musketpowder.com. You can enter in code W2H podcast, and you get a BOGO. That's a buy one, get one. And then our winner from last week's Recipe of the Week, which we'll share in the podcast version post-show, is Nick with Huntivore Podcast. So, Nick, congratulations. Thanks for sharing a tasty recipe with us. We will unpack that in post.
Nick cooks some pretty mean stuff.
Yeah.
Mean.
Angry, mean.
Delicious.
Hopefully not volatile.
Let's hope not.
All right. Hey, so on the line with us, we're really enthused and excited to bring on our guest of the week today. With us on the line is Mark Kenyon. I don't think he needs an introduction, but he's with Wired to Hunt podcast.
Mr. Wired to Hunt.
What's going on, Mark?
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. I love the way you guys open it, just being the okayest podcast. I'm a big fan of under-promising, over-delivering. You guys are knocking it out of the park with that
We
one.
can under-promise and probably under-deliver both ways. So
Yeah. Because if anyone ever says, man, that podcast is okay, it's like, yeah, we know. We know.
I was doing an event last week, and some guys came up to me and introduced themselves to me, and they told me that they're from Climax, Michigan.
Oh.
And I automatically just made the same joke I just told you guys, that you might be setting yourself up for failure with that hometown. So maybe not an appropriate way to start a podcast, but channeling my inner Dan Johnson for this one with an off-color joke.
That's great. I like it. Man, so it's funny. I don't know that we've had a whole lot of folks on here that we could say they don't need an introduction. Certainly in the hunting community, you probably don't need one at all. I think most folks ought to know who you are. You've kind of pioneered what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I know I've been listening to your podcast for quite a few years. I mean, I know you've been involved with some pretty big names in the hunting industry, some awesome conservationists such as Randy Newberg, obviously now with the Meat Eater crew. They're all great people.
Yeah. So
yeah, thank you.
How maybe let's unpack. And unpack's a great word here because I think you're a big backpacker too. How did this all start for you, man? Like what happened, to make that leap? A lot of people look to do something like that. It's hard to know how to start.
Yeah. So I'm struggling to find something that's particularly interesting with this story because, over the years I've kind of rehashed it in various places, and I'd love to have a unique bit of information here. But I guess, it started in a cinder block apartment building in the Upper West Side of New York City. That's a little tidbit people probably didn't know. It started in a dorm room, so it technically wasn't a real apartment. It was a dorm for Columbia University. So big fancy school up there in New York City, and I actually wasn't going to school there. I was there for an internship in New York for an ad agency, and the cheapest housing I could find was in the dorms for the school. And so what you did is you shared a kitchen and a bathroom. It's kind of like I think they call it like a suite style system. So there was, I think, 3 roommates to a kitchen and a bathroom, and then basically a little single room that I packed a tiny bed and a tiny dresser and all my clothes and stuff for the summer into this little tiny room. And it was pretty bare, pretty minimalist, but made it work. And I was out there, like I said, working for an ad agency, doing a bunch of digital marketing, pretty early stage digital marketing. This is right when Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff was just starting to pick up some steam within the business world. I think this was 2007, somewhere in that ballpark.
SEO, pay-per-click, that kind of stuff, pre-roll.
That stuff was,
retargeting.
That stuff was going. Not even retargeting by that at that point. But my job at this company was to actually facilitate relationships with bloggers. So trying to get folks that were just starting some of these early stage blogs back in 2007, 2008 to write about and talk about and promote my clients' products. So that was what I did every day. And I was kind of miserable doing it simply because I was stuck in Manhattan and I couldn't get out to hunt and fish and do the stuff I loved. And I felt claustrophobic, and it was just loud and stinky and too many people. And I missed my outdoor activities. And all that said, I'd go on these lunch breaks and kind of just try to disappear from the office as best as I could. So I'd go down. I was working in this big like skyscraper, I guess, on 42nd Street, I think it was. And so you go down, and the 2 things I would do every day is there was a little shop down the corner where you get $1 slice of pizza. So I go down, wait in line, and get two slices of $1 pizza, this great big New York City slice of pizza.
Oh God, so
and
good.
Then and then I would go and try to find a newsstand that would have something hunting related. This is kind of hard to find in New York City, but you usually will be able to find like a Field and Stream or an Outdoor Life or a few magazines like that. So whenever there's new issues, I was always picking those up, and I would go back to my cubicle, and I'd put my headphones on. I'd kind of sit in the corner of my cubicle and look at these things and dream about being in these places and eat my pizza in misery. And one of these days I finally decided, you know what? I need to be creating something. I need to somehow scratch this itch I have, because I can't get out and do these things, but I need to somehow be involved in them. And every day I'm working with all these bloggers. I finally thought to myself, well, why don't I start one of these things? Maybe I could write about hunting, and that would be fun, and it could get me more involved in this stuff, even though I'm not doing it. And, maybe something I'm learning in this job can help me do that. So I went home one day to that little cinder block apartment building and got in my room and found out, just did some looking online, how to make a website. I learned how to make a website, and then learned, made a Facebook page and made a Twitter account, and started researching how to write blog posts and how to build a blog and how to do all these different kinds of things. Then I started writing cold emails to different writers within the deer hunting world. And I'm a no one. I know nothing. I'm 20 years old. I'm in college. I've hardly had any hunting success to that point. I've hunted my whole life, but with very little success to show for it. And I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to build something. And that is where Wired Hunt started. So started the blog then, and worked on it that summer. But then, the summer ended, school picked back up again, and my senior year of college kind of whisked me away to all the things that a senior year of college does. But it wasn't until the following year that I'd taken a full-time job again in the tech and marketing world, and again found myself wishing that I was doing something outside, and so I returned to wired hunt, and at that point decided, you know what, this is something that I really can. It doesn't need to be just a little hobby thing that I do during the summer. This could be maybe the ticket to making a living with something I'm passionate about. And so, trying to make this story shorter for you, over the next 4 years, I just worked and worked and worked, working full time, but all the hours before and the hours after work, I was building Wired to Hunt, learning how to write well, learning how to film and produce YouTube videos, learning how to connect and engage with people on social media, learning how to market, learning how to build a business, all this stuff. Just kind of immersed myself in all of those different facets of what I was trying to build with Wired to Hunt, and got really lucky and fortunate that people, were enjoying it, and was eventually slowly, year after year after year, able to build something that led to me being able to go full time with it in 2013, and that's continuing to grow and change since then, and I'm still doing it in different forms now, but I'm still very lucky to be able to write and talk and film about hunting and the outdoors and do it for a living.
That's awesome.
You did then what everyone now calls a side hustle. Back before it was like a cool thing, you were doing it because that was your dream, your real dream, and you weren't pontificating about it. You were just working in silence and letting your work do the talking for you.
Yeah, just trying to make that dream a reality. So I try to pinch myself every day and remind myself to be thankful that it worked out.
That's pretty great, man. I mean, so it's got to be interesting for you as a 20-something-year-old in college in New York to starting to kind of carve this out and thinking about, like, back then you're probably just like, okay, I'm learning, I'm figuring this out, I'm doing something that I'm happy about, I don't mind getting up early, staying up late, etc. But did you have a vision back then that you would have authored a book? That you would have made one of the, most widely known hunting podcasts, connected with some of the, most well-known people in the community?
I definitely don't know if I saw all those things coming to fruition early on at that stage. But I will tell you that, by that second year, by the time that I was working full-time out of college, so this would have been the fall of 2009, I think. I did have a vision of someday this is going to be a really good thing someday. I believed that I was going to take it seriously. I was going to find some way for this thing to work in maybe a different form. Maybe it wouldn't be plan A, but maybe then it'd be plan B. And if plan B didn't work out, dang it, I'll make plan C work. I was going to do something meaningful within this world that I love so much. I pretty much dedicated myself to find a way. And so I guess I'm shocked and thrilled and surprised and awestruck and very, very thankful that the certain set of circumstances that I've lived through have come to be, and that I'm able to do this. But I guess it's fair to say that I had confidence that I thought I could do something like this. Now, all those details stuff, life happens for a reason. Things surprise you. You take advantage of the opportunities that arise when they do, and you learn from the mistakes you make, and you kind of struggle through it and figure things out. So not everything's gone right. Not everything I've tried has been terrific, but I've tried to just keep on keeping on.
It's like
and
expectation versus reality meme. You have a plan. What does Mike Tyson say? Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Oh, until you get punched in the face?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Something like that. Exactly.
But I mean, you've taken the punch as well. I'm sure you had your setbacks along the way in some degree. You were doing cold emails, for crying out loud. Like, I'm sure there were a lot of unanswered emails, flat out no's, etc. Like, you probably had to send a lot of those things to get anywhere. It's a lot of work for a little bit of traction.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me, and probably why at least some portion of why things have kind of worked out okay, is that I just love it so much. Now, I'm not telling you all the time I love every single aspect of things, but those days early on, and still to this day when I'm working on the book or something like that, or early on when it was trying to literally code HTML to build a website in 2009, I taught myself HTML to build a website raw like that. Even those days when I was getting up at 4:30 to work before work, and then I was staying up till 2 after work. I was so geeked on it. I was so pumped to be building this thing, and then to watch YouTube videos about deer hunting and be like, man, I wonder if I could do that. And then learn how to use a DSLR camera, then watch another video to learn how to edit video and all that stuff. I mean, that was so much fun that it didn't feel like a grind a lot of the time. It was just me indulging my curiosity and my passion and my excitement for both hunting and communicating about hunting. Both of those things really get me pumped up. So I got lucky that I was able to find something I was passionate about. And I talked to, people like, I got a nephew, a young kid who's trying to, figure out his place in life. And I'm like, man, just find something you're passionate about. And maybe that's not the right answer for everyone, right? It probably isn't. But I guess I got lucky in that I was able to find that thing for me, and it kind of jived with a few things I'm okay at, and it worked. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, finding a passion and sticking to it. And I think having a support network behind you too also helps. And you had to have had some of that along the way, correct?
Oh, for sure. Had number one probably is my wife. I'm just being a trooper for all the late nights of work and all the travel and all the crazy things I've done. Having a great full-time job and quitting it to go out on my own for something so kind of risky and crazy as this. I couldn't have done that if she wasn't giving me the 2 thumbs up. So over and over and over again, she's proven to be a terrific team member for life. And then, so many other people within the industry, people who just, answer an email and give you some suggestions, or someone who introduces you to somebody else, or, all those little networking things. It's kind of cliche and cheesy when people say, oh, well, networking's so important. You got to network. But man, it is the truth. It's a lot of times it comes down to who you know, or having the right connection, or, just being a good person who tries to help other people, and eventually that kind of comes around.
It compounds that networking effect. You meet one person, they know someone you meet, and then eventually it's like you've created this actual network, and you've strengthened the layers within it, and suddenly it's doing things for you that you never could have imagined.
Yeah. I get this question often from people, how do you build a blog, or how do you build a podcast, or how do you build a YouTube show, or how do you do whatever it is that you do? And it's really hard to give, very detailed, customized advice for every single person. But
right, everybody's different.
But I think the general process that it takes to build something within whatever world it is that you're working in, or I guess, let me take that back. If you're trying to do what I did, you got to do one of these 3 things. You've got to just pick your thing. So whether it's writing or photography or podcasting or video or whatever, pick your thing, and then you just got to do it and do it and do it and keep fine-tuning your craft. So for me, when I first started, it was writing. So I started blogging, and that was not good at all. But I was just learning. I didn't go to school for writing or anything like that. I just read every article I could find about how to become a better blogger, or how to build a blog, or how to write better. And then I started buying every book I could find about writing. And I started studying those and trying to teach myself all these things. So I kept on teaching myself and then writing, and teaching myself and writing, doing it over and over and over. Even though nobody was reading it, I had three readers for my first article, and 10 for the next one. So I was do it, and then share it. Keep putting it out in the world. Put it anywhere people will see it. Just send it to your grandma, send it to your mom, send it to Facebook, send it to Twitter, post it on forums, just keep on putting it out there. And then connect. So just do what we're talking about. Reach out to every different person you could possibly think of in this world. Respond to tweets, post comments on their Instagram, post comments on their Facebook, send them a message once. And then if you do those 3 things, if you keep doing those 3 things over and over and over, and get better at each one of those things every time you do it, it slowly has that compounding effect you just talked about. And opportunities start arising, and it just it builds off of that. So that's kind of what I did.
That's beautiful, man.
Awesome.
I love it. And you said before we actually hit the record button and went live here, like, you got to love the process. If you don't love the in-between stuff, the journey, right, before you get to the destination and after you take off, like, you got to love taking those steps every step of the way, so to speak. If you don't like that part of it, like, so I'm thinking about your book as I read that. You actually quoted A Walk in the Wild, which by, was it Bryson? What's his first name? Is it Bill Bryson?
Bill Bryson.
Yeah.
Bill Bryson. Yeah.
Great book. And so he had said, like, it's so humdrum that eventually you just kind of take them one step after the other and your body's just kind of doing this. But it's that's the part you have to fall in love with, is that part right there.
Yeah.
Because it's a grind, man. It wears on you. You get blisters on your feet. You run out of breath. Your legs get tired. Like, but you have to learn to love those things.
Yeah. And I think that's a trick to success, whether it's business or building a media brand, like, what I was trying to do, or being a successful hunter. Any one of those things. Like, you have to learn to love that process, love the journey, and everything else will take care of itself after that.
Yeah, who said the scoreboard will take care of itself if you focus on the game, right? Just focus on the game, and the scoreboard will take care of itself. So that's kind of cool. So you've been doing the podcast for how many years? Like, since 2008, did you say?
No, the website started in 2008. Didn't launch the podcast until late winter of 2014. So we're approaching 6 years of the podcast now.
Sure. But you had all that writing and rapport kind of, I don't know, that momentum behind you there. So when you launched the podcast, you kind of had something already kind of brewing.
Oh yeah, had a built-in audience. I already had a pretty substantial audience just following the website and everything there. So yes, I was able to start the podcast with a built-in audience, and that certainly helped pick up momentum there.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. And so it's interesting that you have, I mean, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but you have enough foresight about you that you're able to kind of see these trends coming. So what led you to do a podcast? Like, why did you, as a writer, think, I should record this stuff with a microphone in a room in my house and start talking at people? Like, how did that come to be? Because that's pretty intuitive and insightful for the time period, right?
It's two things. Number one, I've approached what I've wanted to do always as like medium agnostic. So I don't care about what the medium is I'm using. I just want to get my message out there, however people are taking in information. So first, a blog was a way to do that, and then social media was a way to do that. And so, okay, well, I'm going to tap into this stuff. I'm going to learn how to talk about deer hunting and hunting via Twitter, and then I'm going to learn how to do that via Facebook, and message boards are really big still back then, so I was doing that a lot. So I didn't care what the platform was. I just wanted to figure out where people were going for this stuff. So then I started thinking, man, maybe I can start doing something on YouTube. Maybe there's some interesting things on video. So I started dabbling there. It was never that I was like passionate about, I really want to be a videographer. It was, I think there's a way to tell this story in that form. And so the same thing came about with podcasting. I was more and more aware of podcasts, was a more avid podcast consumer. All the way from 2008 to 2013, I was increasingly listening to more and more podcasts myself. Interestingly, podcasts were probably the tools that helped me the very most to build my business and prepare myself to go full time with it. I listened to a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts and marketing podcasts and business podcasts and things like that. So I'm finding that this podcast medium is a great way to learn. It's a great way to, dive deep into different topics. And I found it to be really engaging. Like, I was really engaged with the host and with the information. And so it was working me as a consumer. So I thought, well, shoot, why wouldn't this work with the hunting world? And so I quit my day job, which gave me a lot more time to try new things. And the very first new thing I knew I wanted to try then at that point was building a podcast. So that's where the podcast thing came about from. And yeah, that worked pretty good. And who knows though, 5 years from now might be something different. And I don't plan to sit on my butt and just stick with what I have been doing.
Yeah, complacency can be a killer. That's So I love that you say you listen to business pod. So I'm going to relate to you here on this vein, and this is where I'm doing the interrupting thing that I talked about.
Yeah, guilty.
So I follow Gary Vaynerchuk. I got to meet him last April, which was probably one of the talk about being starstruck. I was like as giddy as anybody could be, and no one actually knows who he is. Like my wife's like, "Why do you care so much about this guy?" I'm like, "What? I've been following him for 6 years. You don't understand. It's Gary V." And he talks a lot about what you're talking about, which is don't be agnostic when it comes to these mediums. He's day trading attention, right? So where are people consuming content? So I love that you have the audio word going out through podcasts. You have the written word going out through blog articles, now a book, and then you have the video stories going out through YouTube and other channels like Meat Eater. So you've definitely covered your ground that way. And then you said like the social media is a conduit. Well, where's the attention at, right? Sometimes it's Facebook, maybe it's Twitter, maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's whatever it's going to be, TikTok, who knows? In the future, we'll have to learn some of those other nuances, but you're doing a great job of navigating it. Like you've been on my radar, like not radar, but like you've been in my consumption model as a consumer of hunting material for the last 5 years at least. I've probably been following you around the same time I started following Gary Vee, actually.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, the danger of following Gary Vee is that you will feel perpetually inadequate because it's hard to keep up with that guy.
I treat him like my boss. That's what I do for my side hustle. I just listen to him, picture him yelling at me for not doing something. But you're right.
Man, he's definitely a great guiding light. It was his first book, Crush It, that made me decide to make the decision. It was that fall of 2009. I was at a bookstore. I was at a Barnes & Noble in San Francisco, and on an end cap, I saw this black book with green letters, and the front said, "Why now is the time to crush it.
Oh my
Cash
God.
in on your passion."
I love it.
And I picked up that book, and I started reading it, and that book changed my life. And I decided that I read the whole book that night, and that night was the night I made that decision. I'm doing this thing.
Did I lend that book to you, Greg?
I do have it.
The signed copy?
Yeah.
You better give that
it's
back.
in a
you son
safe
of
place.
A bitch. Okay. That's incredible, Mark. How awesome, man. I mean, I don't think there's a better example of a book changing someone's life. However, I will say your book has now set me on a trajectory to go to Yellowstone National Park. So
Nice.
I told my wife, like,
awesome.
The first day I cracked it open, I'm like, guess where we're going? And that might happen this year. So I'm pretty enthused,
Good.
man.
That's great. I love to hear it. That is the coolest thing. That is the greatest reward I get from any of the projects that I work on, is hearing from someone about the positive way that, some piece of my work has been able to influence or change their life in some kind of way. And hearing that from the book or the podcast or something, that, man, you can't beat that. So I appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah, well, it's important. I think it's important. I think people should read it. Honestly, the Greg knows more than I do about like some of the figures you talk about in there, like the all the different land acts and the flippa and all these different things. Like you navigated that really well. Maybe spend a little bit of time talking about like how many national parks and state parks did you go to that went into this book, and kind of paint the picture for folks that maybe haven't picked it up yet, what they can expect.
Yeah, so the book is called That Wild Country, An Epic Journey through the Past, Present, and Future of America's Public Lands. And so this is the story of what I just said there, the history of how we got our public lands and how this whole system came to be, an examination of what's happening right now and what it all might mean for the future of these places. But then, the through line of that informational narrative, the through line is a series of my own adventures out in these public lands. So I wanted to use a series of my own travels to kind of illustrate the history, to illustrate the issues, and to just help share why these places are so damn special. So I'm lucky to be able to spend a lot of time out in some of these wild places, both out west and other parts of the country. So I had a good number of options to pick from. But when I decided to write the book, was right around somewhere in 2016, I guess. So at that point, I started really paying attention to everything I was doing. I was starting to take copious notes and just thinking about where these things might fit into this story that I was starting to formulate in my mind. And so, yeah, I think it ended up being 10 trips that I included in this book. Several of those were national parks. Several of those were designated wilderness areas, some Bureau of Land Management lands, national forests, a national lake shore, a wildlife refuge as well. So federal public lands across the country are bucketed into these different designations. So all those things I just listed out. There's all these different types of federal public land out there, and they're all managed for slightly different uses. They're managed by different organizations. So that's an important thing, I think, that I tried to explain in the very beginning of the book that a lot of people don't realize, is that there's a whole bunch of types of public land out there. I know early on in my life, I just kind of knew there was national parks, and then there was other stuff, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I think that whole information gap and that example I just shared with you is just one of those missing pieces of information. I realized there was this huge information gap where a lot of people know we have some kind of public land out there. They're aware of our national parks especially. And then within like the hunting and fishing world, maybe we're a little bit more aware because we see people out there in national forests, or you hear people talk about wilderness or something. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of like how did we get here, or who are the people that actually fought to put these places on the map, or what are all the frameworks and policies that govern this stuff, or why do people argue about it so much? You hear about all these controversies and you see this stuff pop up on the news, and before I ever started diving into it myself, I didn't really understand it at all. And I worked in this industry and in this world. I spent a lot of time in these places, so I kind of realized that if I don't understand this stuff very well, sure as hell a lot of other people in the country that don't. Mm-hmm. So that's why I decided to write this book, because I wanted to write something that would kind of serve as a beginner's guide to our public lands and a really fun journey throughout them, so that by the time you read this, you've had a good time, you're inspired to go out and explore these places yourself, and you have at least a basic foundation to understand the news that you're seeing today, to understand the work that went into getting to this point, and to also be better positioned to try to keep them around.
Yeah, and you did a great job of integrating a lot of the history and I guess the progression of a lot of these places too, as far as policies and the big players that were involved with them.
It's a lot to take in. You know, it really is. There's a lot that's transpired. You know, the talking about like the revolution of like just developing our lands in this country, becoming who we are, and then some of those folks realizing, hey, whoa, wait a second. If we keep developing this, like you had said several times, like we can't recreate the redwood forest, we can't recreate the Grand Canyon, we can't reproduce these natural wonders. We need to protect them. And so, what were some of the biggest kind of acts or bills that were passed to protect them that stood out from the book?
I mean, you just mentioned one of the biggest challenges, which is how do you filter down the million different things that have gone on over the last 150 years down to the single or the several most important? Because even as it stands, I look back at it now and I look at the book and I think to myself, man, I probably should have even cut more out, because there's this risk of overwhelming people with minutia or just like too much of the policy stuff or too much. But I kept on being, well, this is really important, understanding this is important, right, and this is important.
It's kind of a domino effect, and it's all part of the story.
This had to happen before this next thing could happen. So, like, I should probably talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't know where to draw those lines.
Yeah, you had a ton of facts.
Yeah. So I tried to cut as much as I could and just leave like the essential few. But that was hard to do. So I think, some of the very most important steps in this whole thing were, we began the federal public land system back in 1872 with the creation of Yellowstone National Park. And that was signed into existence by President Ulysses S. Grant. And that kind of set this precedent for the fact that, hey, we as a government can set aside a large chunk of land to be managed by the federal government for the people and for all these various uses, for the wildlife, for recreational enjoyment, et cetera, et cetera. And so that set this precedent that we could do that at the federal level. There have been some state things like that, but this is the first national park. And things didn't start right then, right? As you guys read in the book, there was this kind of slow, steady build as people started realizing that, wow, this country is not, never ending. The resources are not infinite. We quickly were running out of space and wildlife and natural resources and gobbling it up and shooting it down and cutting it over and all these things. So there became this growing movement to start trying to protect a little bit of what was out there. And so that came to fruition with that national park. Once that national park was created, the Forest Reserve Act.
What page is it?
I am having a brain fart right now. Yeah. But whatever the hell this piece of legislation was that followed soon after that in the early 1880s,
okay.
I think it was now.
We won't hold you to it.
Essentially, this was the piece of legislation that allowed for the creation of forest reserves, which are now known as national forests. So presidents had the power to circle a piece of land and say, this is now going to be a forest reserve. And that was massive. That was a huge, huge thing, because that's when we really started getting significant pieces of public land set aside that couldn't be homesteaded, that couldn't be, clear cut without mercy, that actually had some oversight on them. So that's when we started seeing some chunks of 1 million acres, 2 million acres, things like that
That's big stuff.
being put into the public. Yeah.
And
that's when Theodore Roosevelt started getting involved.
Mm-hmm.
He started advocating for those in a big way when he was founding the Boone and Crockett Club.
And this was before he was even president.
Yes. Before he was president, he really had his fingers on the strings of the puppet. He was even puppeteering back then and making that all happen. So he was really, really influential when it came to national forests. And then when he became president, he, of course, signed the Antiquities Act, which then allowed for the creation of national monuments, which is a huge thing because national monuments are the first step in many cases to either a permanently protected landscape and monument form, or some days, in some cases, national parks. So he named the Grand Canyon a national monument at a time that a lot of people were trying to chew it up as a tourist attraction or mining facility, all these different things. And he said, no, do not mar it. You can't do anything to it that'll make it better. You got to save this thing for our children and our children's children.
Yeah, that was
so he named it a national monument.
And I got to visit there just this past spring, so almost a year ago now, and it's a crazy place. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
I don't know there's no words to describe it other than just awesome and huge and dangerous and beautiful all in one.
Well, you had said too, like, and I know this is shiny object syndrome at play here, but or maybe Scotch, one or the other, but in any event, I'm thinking, like you had mentioned, like it's very important to get out of the car and not just pass through these places that are so special, and like, roll your sleeves up, get some dirt under your fingernails, maybe, some sweat in your brow, and maybe even some blood and some pain and some blisters, because there becomes a new appreciation for these lands when you're out in them, experiencing them, not just looking at them.
Oh yeah, 100%. Huge advocate for that. And I guess I'd rather you drive through them than do nothing. So
correct. Yep. Yeah, we talked about accessibility. Yep.
I think that's the first step. Yes, but you'd be remiss if you didn't take advantage of the opportunity to actually get out there. That's when the real magic happens. So that kind of leads me really well into the final really important moment in the history of our public lands, with the passing of the Wilderness Act. So you had first this first national park, and then you had the creation of national forests. So this new designation of public land that allowed some more uses of those places. So national parks were very recreation focused. National forests were very multiple use focused. So doing some logging, doing some mineral extraction, doing some recreation, protecting it still for water and natural resources. But then you had to also designate something on the opposite side of the scale, which is what we came to with the Wilderness Act, which was, yes, there are places and times where we should be developing public lands in a careful, sustainable way. But there are also some times and some places where maybe the absolute highest use, the best thing we can do, is to just leave them exactly as they are. Let's not build a visitor center in the middle of them and a bunch of parking lots and a bunch of hotels. Let's not put a bunch of drills. Let's not clear cut it all down. We need a few last remnant pieces of wilderness, capital W in this case. And I'm so thankful that eventually became law in the 60s, because it gives us places like the Bob Marshall Wilderness or the Frank Church Wilderness or the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, places that you can't help but have life-changing experiences when you go out to the middle of a place like that and see what this earth is really made of. I live for places like that and experiences like that. So that was really a pinnacle of the public land movement, where we were finally able to have this final step in the methodology of protecting our country's land. So we have all these different ways of going about it, all with different priorities. And I think that's what makes our public land system so special, is that we haven't just chose one single way of doing it and saying, like, nope, we're going to have public lands only for these people. It's only to be used this one way, and it's always going to be just like this. No, we've said, you know what? We understand there's a lot of stakeholders. We understand there's a lot of possible uses. We understand that there's a sliding scale as far as how people want to interact with these places. So we're going to, the people that worked through this process over the decades had the foresight to realize this and to have things as wildly different as national parks and wilderness areas. Yellowstone or Yosemite, like Yosemite Valley, for example, looks very, very, very different than a wilderness area. And I think it's good that we have both.
I would agree. And getting into these zones, like we talked about, like I've been to the Boundary Water Canoe Area. That's probably the most remote place I've been in terms of wilderness with a capital W. And it's one of the most memorable, I wouldn't even know if I would call it a vacation, but one of the most memorable places and experiences I've ever had and been to. What's the most wilderness place you guys have been to? Craig, what about you?
I can't say as I've actually had a good wilderness experience where I can say I've been off the grid for a week. It's never happened in my lifetime.
Well, we're going to plan.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Plot, scheme.
I mean,
right?
I've been to a few national parks, but it's, if I have relatives that really can't get around that well, it's not like I can go get off the path. My wife and I want to. Mm-hmm. It's, the passion is there. Mm-hmm. But if, we have mother-in-law with or a young child with or something, it's kind of hard to get too far away. So I don't want to make that an excuse, but that's kind of usually when we go to see these places, it's an entire family because everybody wants to see it.
Yeah. So that's good though too. That's a good point.
But no, I've not had the opportunity. So it's going to happen.
Yeah, it goes right back to that value of having the different options, right?
Right.
So you can go and you can drive through Yellowstone and still have a cool experience.
Yeah,
and someday
we drove through Glacier, going to the Sun Road. It was only open for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks out of that year when we went, because of all the construction that goes on with all the erosion. They get so much snowfall. Mm-hmm. We're in there in the middle to end of August, and there's still snow on the peaks. It's awesome.
Amazing place.
Oh, it's an amazing place. Didn't get to see hardly any of it compared to what we would love to have seen.
So, Mark, so we'll bookmark the most wilderness place you've been to, and maybe it'll coincide with your most memorable hunt. And if you could share that story with us, I'm excited to hear it because I know you had something kind of queued up in your mind before we started. And then from there, we do have a couple calls in queue, so we'll keep those guys in there, gals, whoever they might be, and then we'll open up the lines after the memorable hunt and take a couple calls just for Q&A, if that sounds all right for you.
Yeah. So this will be a really hard pivot because my memorable hunt that I'm going to share with you is the complete opposite, probably, of my wilderness experiences, but it's very memorable for different reasons. This hunt that sticks with me right now, especially, was with my son. This was this last spring. My son was just a little bit over a year old, and I took him out for our first quote-unquote turkey hunt. I strapped him on my chest, like in that little chest pack, and we went out into the woods, a little property I've got access to that's right behind some houses, right off the road. From the spot where we walked into, you can see barns and houses and cars. It's not wilderness at all. But we were able to sneak in and literally just inside the edge of the woods. Like we just got past the fields, just to the edge of the woods. I slipped in late morning with him, and I just was planning on I didn't even bring a gun. So it wasn't really a hunt, but it was a hunt, quote unquote, with him just to try to have a good time and see if we could see a bird and just give him a cool experience. And right away I spotted a gobbler way off in the opposite corner of the field. So we hunkered down and I started calling. And then, this bird was so far away, though. He was kind of strutting around way off in the distance. And maybe 5 minutes into watching that bird and occasionally calling, all of a sudden from 80 yards away in the other direction, a new gobbler just exploded. And my son kind of jumps and looks that way. He's like, Dad, Dad. And all of a sudden there's this other bird, and he's coming in on a string to me. And so I'm yelping. And every time I mouth yelp, my son, who's strapped onto my chest, and we're kneeling down in the middle of a 2-track in the woods. There's no blind, there's no nothing. We're just kneeling down in the leaves. Every time I yelp with my mouth, my son starts to mimic it. So I'm like, and he'd be like, so he's doing
That's a good call. Look at that.
And
That's
the
awesome.
gobblers, the
How old is
turkey
he?
is gobbling back every single time. He's just over a year old at that point.
Oh my gosh, how
So,
cute.
So the two of us are yelping at the turkey. The turkey's gobbling back. My son's holding a little plastic turkey figurine. He's like throwing it up in the air and bopping in the leaves and crashing leaves and looking at me and giggling and pointing at the turkey. And that son of a gun comes all the way into 40 yards, hammering his face off, just going nuts. My son's going nuts. There's nothing between us. The turkey should see us and my son flipping out, but he doesn't. And if I'd had a gun, and if I wasn't worried about traumatizing my son, we could have killed a turkey on our very first hunt together. And it was so cool. I actually have little phone videos of it still that I was kind of taking throughout. So someday I can't wait to share that with him. It was all about sharing that experience with my son. And I think that's where I am in my life now is wanting to share these incredible experiences and these places I've been able to visit. I want to share those things with my son now and a second son here arriving in just a matter of days. That's what I'm most excited about now. And that's why things like this book or other projects that I hope can leave wild places and wild animals around for my kids. That's why I'm doing these things now, is to hopefully leave something behind that's better than we got it now.
Leave a legacy. I love that. That's a great story, by the way. Like that like
Thank
warmed my heart.
Yeah, it is an awesome story to see your kid react and mimic and do what kids do. I know I used to do certain things, and my niece would imitate them, and good, bad, or worse, it was still pretty comical.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes inappropriate.
Oh,
We just had my daughter in studio before we started. She's, she likes to hear her voice on the mic. So future co-host maybe.
Yeah, that's what I put on. That's what I put on our little Instagram story.
Yeah. Well,
That's pretty awesome.
we got one caller coming from Connecticut. I know this caller well. I'm going to bring him in. It's D-Rock. He runs the East Coast Bowhunter podcast. Hey, D-Rock, thanks for waiting there with us, bud. You're live on the show. What's going on?
What's going on, E-Money? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, D-Rock? D-Money.
Good. Nice to talk to Greg and definitely honored to talk to Mark. Mark, what's going on, Mark? I've been wanting to shake your hand for a while, but I guess this will do for now.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. It's good. I'm glad to be able to chat with you.
Hell yeah, man. So, as Eric said, I'm D-Rock from the East Coast Bowhunter podcast, and I've been listening to the whole show. So the first things first, I'm sorry, Eric, the music while I'm on hold, man, I feel like
And you've been on hold a long
That was a
time.
deliberate decision because I think people were getting confused if they were brought into the show or not before. So maybe I'll change it back. Thanks for the feedback, D-Ron.
I'm no expert at podcasting, but I felt like, am I like in one of those mystery boat shows, or should I be solving a detective scene? I don't know.
This is the
But
OKS
it was cool.
podcast, right? We gotta live up to our name.
So, and real quick, I'm a little jelly that you're sipping on the Dalmore, sitting right in front of me as I watch. So,
That's good stuff.
But anyways, Mark, I have a good question for you, man. That this is something that I've been wanting to ask you for quite some time now. And at our show, we really focus and preach the greater good, which is kind of corny to some, but at the same time, like that's our backing and our repertoire and what we have in our resume, in the sense of really trying to bring numbers up in every manner or form that we could possible. And you mentioned earlier that podcasting is a really good medium to connect and learn and really almost like a gateway. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you is how did it open doors for you, or what door did it open for you personally that you appreciate the most, especially through podcasting? And before you answer that, the reason I ask this is something very personal to me, because about, I want to say maybe, 4 years ago, I started listening to podcasts, specifically hunting podcasts, really hardcore, just to learn and really specifically learn whitetail primarily. But Wired to Hunt was one of the primary podcasts that I was listening to along with others. And it really seemed to click and make sense and be relatable all at the same time. And me, I love to read and I love to soak up knowledge, but there's no better way to just soak your ears with knowledge as you're trucking along through work, the work day specifically for me, or even long drives. So that's why for me, I get my passion from podcasting and listening to podcasts, because it seems to be the new age wealth of knowledge, or the new age encyclopedia. And this is coming from a bookworm that his dad owned a bookstore, and when it closed down, guess what? We had an attic full of books. So just to have it in, I guess, the most relatable form to someone like yourself or Eric or even Greg, to put it in such an easy format, that was huge for me. And it opened up so many doors, and especially got the podcast going for myself personally and my co-host Trev. But for you, I'm very curious, like what door it opened up for you, because I know you had other ventures. I know it's a loaded question, so bear with me. I know you had other ventures, but there's got to be something that really stands out when you started podcasting that boom, just kind of hits you first thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and I'm really, honored to hear that you found Wired to Hunt helpful in the past for yourself. So thanks for listening. I think podcasts did two things, and I think you touched on a couple, but one, as you described, podcasts allow for a different level of education, just different than anything else out there right now. You can write articles, you can write a hunting book, you can do a tutorial on YouTube, whatever, but you can have a TV show on the Outdoor Channel, but nothing allows you the opportunity that a podcast does, as far as the time available, as far as how deep you can go into things. And so just from a purely educational standpoint, it's just best in class. So for a long time, one of the main things I was trying to do with Wired to Hunt was be one of the best educational resources. So I was trying to do that with the website, but with the podcast, just all of a sudden I was able to crank that up to a brand new level. And kind of like you, I've always been a bookworm, and I've been I'm just a incredibly curious person. I want to learn, and never stop learning. So I wanted to talk to all the best hunters out there. I wanted to talk to all these different people for myself personally. So having that podcast allowed me to selfishly do the thing that I was most curious and interested in, but do it in a way that as I learned, I could share everything I was learning with, a large audience of people alongside of me. So number one, it was just the best way I found yet to educate people, because it was educating people as I educated myself. Number two, though, and I think this was the secret sauce, probably, to why a lot of other things have gone decent for me. And that's the fact that I think podcasts, or at least the way we've done a podcast, allows for you to develop a very personal connection between the host and the listener. When you have got my voice in your headphones every week or multiple days a week, and you tune in for a couple hours at a time, and every week you're hearing about my kids, and you're hearing about this hunt, and you're hearing about this thing I screwed up, and you're hearing how my buddy and I are dealing with challenges of balancing hunting and our family lives, and you hear about the time I missed a buck, and you heard about, this thing and that thing, you develop almost a personal relationship with the host. You kind of feel like we're buddies. And that has happened over the course of 60 years now doing this podcast, to where now I have tens of thousands of people that feel like we've got a really strong personal connection, me and you, or
Mark,
me and whoever.
I'm laughing because I awkwardly met you at ATA like 3 years ago, and I'm certain you had no effing clue who I was. I was like, hey, Mark. And you're like, hey, yeah. You're really nice about it, which is great. But I was like, I'm Eric with Where to Hunt. You're like, all right. But I felt like I knew you, so it's kind of funny.
That exactly. People, and that's like it's really awesome. It's the coolest thing, and I appreciate it so much that people allow me into their lives, and just like people allow you guys into their lives when they listen to your podcast. But I think that is something that podcasts uniquely do. I think podcast listeners develop a relationship with the creator in a way that's unique compared to a writer, compared to a TV show host, compared to anything else. And I think it builds more rabid fans than anything because of that. So the podcast connected me with my audience in a way that none of my other mediums ever did. And I think that has catapulted all my other projects because of it.
Amen, brother. Well said. And I'll jump off the line to get other callers in. And I'm really appreciative for your time. And E and Greg, thank you for consistently letting me chime into your show.
We like hearing from
man,
you.
Regular. Put it on your tab.
For sure.
Nice meeting you, man. Thank you.
Likewise, Mark. And I'll be bugging you on the social media. Maybe you could get your voice heard on the East Coast. So have a good night, fellas.
Sounds good. Hit me up. Have a great night.
All right, peace.
So we got one more we'll bring in before we call it, Mark. We'll do one more Q&A. We got, let's see here, Zach Hoheisel coming out of Appleton, Wisconsin. Zach, you're live on the show. How you doing, buddy?
Good. I'm not sure where you guys are at because I've been listening to awful hold music for a while, so I don't want to train wreck your episode.
It's only the second person to complain tonight about
music.
the awful music.
I've heard you guys loud and clear. No more hold music. I'll fix that.
There's one thing you have to do this week.
So anyway, like I said, I don't want to train wreck and change the subject, but I just wanted to call in and kind of fanboy out for a second. For Mark, I found you. I remember I was working with my brother. We were doing a painting job, and I was complaining about how much I hate painting. And he was like, "You need to start listening to podcasts. It'll make your day go by faster." And I had no idea what a podcast was. So I just typed in hunting because I figured that'd be something I want to listen to. And at the time, I think you were one of the only hunting podcasts out there, and you were on episode 13. And I binge listened to I binge listened all 13 episodes. And I've been listening every week since. It's just been super cool. I told my wife not too long ago, it's just been cool to it's felt like I kind of got to know you. And when you told Dan that you were having a baby for the first time and all that, it was just really cool. And you're one of the very few people that I've been following for that long of time because I feel like you're really doing things for the right reasons. You've always put out great stuff, and I just have been a huge fan for a long time. And you really inspired me to start doing some of my own things. And I just want to thank you for all the great stuff you've done over the years.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you so much for saying that and for following along for that long. That means the world. Makes it all worthwhile. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Zach, we're hooking you up with these guests. I think I've heard from you more than that, and you've been a guest on the show, but I think I remember you called in, was a Sam Soholt that was on, and he's super inspirational too. His story is incredible, for different reasons.
I would say Mark and Sam are the two. Eric, you've been nailing them.
Who else should we get, Zach? Help me out here. Who else do you want to talk to? This is great.
Yeah, so Eric, you got great guests. Mark, I just want to thank you again for all you've done. I'm a long-time listener, and I also want to say I think you are the perfect yin to Dan Johnson's yang. So keep it up.
Yeah, we certainly balance each other's weird things pretty decently well. It's a good pairing.
Yeah. Well, I'll hop off here. I'm sure there's other people. Are you trying to wrap up? So I appreciate you letting me call in again, Eric.
Yeah, man. Anytime. Thanks so much. We'll
Zach.
get you in studio soon.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, we'll see you.
How about that, Mark? What do you think? That's two real nice compliments, and I'm sure we could take plenty more, but we don't want to take too much of your time. You got a little one. You got another one on the way. That's exciting.
Yeah, congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, any day now. So we got the pack and play all set up, got the baby bag ready to go for the hospital, and now we're just waiting for the action.
Your wife probably like, get this baby out. We have two right now. I have a 4-month-old as of yesterday. He's 4 months, and then we have a 2-year-old. They're 2 years and 8 days apart. So my wife is a saint. She not only raises our kids, she cooked Greg and I dinner in the Instant Pot tonight. We had a venison roast.
Nice piece of hindquarter roast.
It was delicious. And she lets us do this. And 2 kids you're in for it, buddy. I hope you're ready for reliving that again with another one. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's magical how much it's crazy how much you forget about that you never thought you would forget. And you're like, oh my God, I forgot about how little they were. Like, there's all sorts of nuances that come back to you. It's cool.
Yeah, it's becoming very real at this point. So I'm trying to brace myself for the whole infant stage again. It's just now getting easier with like our son turns 2 this Friday. And so I will be kind of in a similar situation to you will be with a 2-year-old and then an infant. And I don't know, it's going to be a whole new adventure.
Are they going to share birthdays? We had a concern of that. We thought we were gonna hit that mark almost. 2 September babies. How close is it to that happening for you?
They have the exact same due date. So according to conception, they're supposed to have the same birthday. But our first son actually came 2 weeks early.
Okay.
So kiddo number 2 isn't supposed to arrive for 2 weeks from now, but I'm kind of planning on him arriving in the same time as our first. Mm-hmm. So anytime from this Friday on, I'm just expecting game time.
Cool. Well, how cool is it that you do your own thing? By and large, obviously you have obligations, but what a great life you've carved out for you and your family, man. That's super cool. We're happy to have heard your story too.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I'm really fortunate and very thankful for that, and appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share that story today.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go ahead and end the live broadcast, so thanks again. And just so people know that might not know about you, doubtful, but go ahead and share where they can get the book and where they can find some of your content.
Yeah, so the book is called That Wild Country, and you can find it on Amazon or a variety of different booksellers online or in person. So check that out, and you can see everything else I've got going on by just searching Wired to Hunt. If you search that on a podcast app, you'll find my podcast app. If you look for that on Instagram, you'll find my socials, Facebook, Twitter, all the above. And I'm very active on all those platforms. I also still do some writing over on the Meat Eater website. And finally, I also host a show for Meat Eater that's called The Back 40, which is on our Meat Eater YouTube channel. It's all about building a whitetail property and managing it for biodiversity and deer hunting. So it's kind of a different take on your typical whitetail show, but it's been a lot of fun and something new we're working on. So that's what I got going on.
What's the future of Back 40 looking like? I thought I had heard or read that it was possibly being given away. Is that correct?
Ooh.
Yeah, we're giving it away in 2021.
Okay, so another season under its belt to see if you can squeeze some more out of it, and then is that a project that you think will continue, or can you not say?
Well, all I know is this year. This year is
Okay.
just going to be a ton of work, lots and lots and lots and lots of work. The first year was really about learning the property, trying to bring a bunch of experts out to get recommendations and to hunt it and kind of see what's going on already. And now year two is trying to implement everything we learned about last year.
Sure.
So starting here in just a matter of weeks, it's going to be getting our hands dirty and trying to build this thing and make some quick changes that will hopefully have a long-term impact.
Yeah, and it's a pretty real-world situation that a lot of landowners go through. I mean, even here in Wisconsin, you got, the 20 to 80 acre parcels or 40 acre parcels, 60 acre parcels that people own, and they've done things the same over and over. The fields get planted, and rotated in crops, but they don't do like what you guys have done with that piece of property. So it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, thank you. It's a challenge, but I think it's gonna be fun seeing it all come together. The year one was a tough one, but I learned a lot, and I'm excited to see what we can do.
Awesome.
It's exciting. Well, cool. Thanks so much again. We're gonna cut the live feed and we'll keep you on for just a minute here to debrief, and that'll be it for the night. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for the calls that came in.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.